The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was already awake, nursing my second cup of coffee and watching the snow fall outside my kitchen window in Toronto. The number on my phone showed my brother's name, Glenn. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks. Not since our last tense visit to Mom's nursing home. Douglas, his voice had that false sanity that immediately put me on edge. I have some difficult news. Mom passed away last night. Peacefully in her sleep, I set down my coffee mug, my hands suddenly unsteady. What? When? I was just planning to visit her today. The funeral is Friday, he continued, cutting me off. His tone shifted, becoming almost businesslike. I've already made the arrangements. Oh, and Douglas, about Mom's estate, the will is very clear. Everything goes to me. The house, the cottage in Muskoka, her investments, all of it. You get nothing. Don't even think about contesting it. Then he hung up. I stood there in my kitchen staring at the phone in disbelief. My mother died just like that. And Glenn's first priority was to inform me I was getting nothing. Not I'm sorry. Not she went peacefully, but a threat not to contest the will. Something was very, very wrong. Let me back up. My name is Douglas Harrison. I'm 64 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 40 years designing infrastructure across Ontario. My wife, Catherine, passed away 3 years ago from cancer. We had one daughter, Emma, who's now 28 and working as a marine biologist in Vancouver. After Catherine died, I threw myself into volunteering and staying close to Mom. She'd been my rock through the grief. My brother Glenn is 4 years younger, 58. We grew up close enough, playing hockey in the driveway of our old house in North York. But as adults, we drifted. Glenn became a real estate agent, married Patricia, had 2 kids. On the surface, everything looked fine, but I noticed things over the years. Glenn was always chasing the next big deal, always stretching himself thin financially. His business had some rough patches. There were whispered conversations at family dinners about investments that went south, about Patricia working double shifts as a nurse to keep them afloat. Our mother, Helen Harrison, was 85 and had been sharp as a tack her entire life. A retired school teacher, she could still recite poetry from memory and beat anyone at Scrabble. She lived independently in her home in Richmond Hill until about 9 months ago when Glenn convinced her she needed extra help. He suggested he become her power of attorney just to manage bills and medical appointments. Mom was hesitant, but Glenn was persuasive. He was her baby boy after all. That's when everything changed. Within weeks of Glenn getting the POA, Mom was suddenly diagnosed with severe dementia. Glenn moved her into a nursing home, Maple Grove Care Center, saying she couldn't live alone anymore. When I visited, I was shocked. My vibrant, witty mother sat in a chair, staring vacantly. She didn't recognize me. She barely spoke. When she did, it was confused, fragmented. Is this really possible? I asked her doctor, Dr. James Whitmore. She was fine 2 months ago. Dementia can progress very rapidly in some cases, he said smoothly. The cognitive decline in patients her age can be quite sudden, but it didn't sit right with me. I visited Mom 3 times a week anyway. Even when she didn't know who I was, I'd hold her hand, tell her about Emma, about the projects I was working on as a volunteer. Glenn visited too, but less frequently. When he did, he always seemed rushed, always checking his watch. Now, standing in my kitchen with Glenn's words still ringing in my ears, I realized what I'd been too blind to see. This wasn't grief talking. This was greed. I called Maple Grove Care Center immediately. I'm calling about my mother, Helen Harrison, I said when someone finally answered. I just heard she passed away last night. There was a pause. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison, but I don't have any record of that. Let me check her room. My heart started pounding. A few minutes later, the nurse came back on the line. Sir, your mother is fine. She's having breakfast right now. Is there some confusion? I sat down heavily. Can you do me a favor? Don't tell anyone I called, especially not my brother. I hung up and immediately dialed my daughter. Emma answered on the 3rd ring, sounding worried. Dad, it's barely 7 o'clock in the morning there. What's wrong? Your uncle just told me Grandma died, but she didn't. She's alive. Emma, I think Glenn is trying to steal her estate. There was silence then. Dad, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I need to figure this out fast. He said the funeral is Friday. That's 3 days from now. After talking to Emma, I spent the morning making calls. First, I contacted a lawyer I'd worked with before on a construction contract dispute. Robert Chen. I explained the situation. Douglas, this is serious. Robert said, if your brother has power of attorney and is misrepresenting your mother's condition or misappropriating her assets, we are talking about criminal charges. But you need evidence. Solid evidence. Next, I hired a private investigator, Sarah Mitchell. She came to my house that afternoon, a sharp woman in her mid-40s with grey streaking her dark hair. How long has your brother had POA? She asked, taking notes. 9 months right after Mom supposedly developed dementia, and before that your mother was competent completely. She was volunteering at the library playing bridge twice a week. Then suddenly she couldn't remember her own name. Sarah nodded. I've seen cases like this. Give me 48 hours. I'll find out what's happening with your mother's finances. That evening I drove to Maple Grove. I didn't tell them I was coming. When I got to Mom's room, she was sitting in her usual chair by the window, staring out at the darkening sky. Her grey hair was thin now, her face more lined than I remembered. But something about her seemed different tonight. Less drugged, more present. Mom, I said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. She turned slowly, those familiar brown eyes meeting mine. There was something in them. Recognition, or was I imagining it? It's me, Douglas, your son. She blinked, her mouth working like she wanted to say something. But then a nurse came in to check her vitals, and the moment was gone. I drove home through the snow, my mind racing. What was Glenn planning? A fake funeral to convince everyone Mom was dead. Then what? Transfer all her assets while everyone thought she was gone? It was insane. It was also, I was realizing, potentially brilliant in its audacity. Sarah called me the next morning. Douglas, you need to sit down. I sat at my kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear. Your brother has been very busy. In the past 8 months, he's transferred approximately $280,000 from your mother's accounts into his own. He sold her cottage in Muskoka to a numbered company, which I'm still tracing, but I suspect he's behind it. He's also been drawing on her credit cards. And Douglas, the doctor who diagnosed your mother's dementia, Dr. James Whitmore. He went to university with your brother. They've been friends for 30 years. I felt sick. So, Mom's dementia could be medication-induced. If she's being overprescribed sedatives or antipsychotics, it would explain the sudden cognitive decline and the vacant behavior. That's attempted murder. That's what we need to prove. I'm getting copies of her medical records, but that takes time. In the meantime, I suggest you visit your mother again. Document everything. Record conversations with your brother if you can. Ontario's a one-party consent province. That afternoon, I was back at Maple Grove. I'd brought my phone, ready to record anything suspicious, but when I got to Mom's room, it was empty. A nurse I didn't recognize was changing the sheets. Where's my mother? I asked, panic rising. Oh, Mr. Harrison, your brother took her out for a drive. He said she needed some air. My blood ran cold. When? About an hour ago. I ran to the parking lot, but Glenn's black Mercedes was already gone. I tried calling him. No answer. I called 5 times. Nothing. Finally, 3 hours later, they returned. Glenn helped Mom out of the car, supporting her as she shuffled back to her room. She looked exhausted, confused. Glenn saw me waiting in the hallway. Douglas, he said, not even bothering to hide his annoyance. What are you doing here? You said Mom died yesterday. Yet here she is. He had the audacity to laugh. Oh, that. Yeah. Sorry about the confusion. I meant to call you back. False alarm. Mom had a bad episode yesterday. And I thought, well, you know, these things happen with dementia. Where did you take her today? Just for a drive. She likes getting out. Really? Because she looks like she can barely stand. Back off, Douglas. His voice dropped, became harder. I'm her power of attorney. I make the decisions about her care, not you. You want to challenge that? Get a lawyer. He brushed past me, helping Mom into her room. Through the doorway, I watched him settle her into her chair, speaking to her in a low voice I couldn't hear. Then he left, not even looking at me as he walked away. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello. Silence. Then a whisper. A woman's voice, faint and scratchy. Douglas. Yes. Who is this? Douglas. It's me. The voice was so quiet I had to press the phone hard against my ear. Who? It's your mother. I froze. That couldn't be. Mom was right there in her room and this call was coming from. I checked the screen. A blocked number. Douglas, listen carefully. I don't have much time. I need you to come to my room tonight. Late after 10 o'clock. Make sure Glenn isn't here. And Douglas, don't tell anyone about this call. The line went dead. I stood in the parking lot, snow falling around me, staring at my phone like it had transformed into something alien. That was impossible. Mom couldn't have called me. She could barely string two words together. And yet that voice, even whispered and strained, had sounded like her, the real her, the sharp, clear-minded woman I'd known my entire life. I waited in my car until after 1000 p.m. watching the nursing home. Glenn's Mercedes was long gone. The night shift was on, just a skeleton crew. I used my key code to enter through the side door and made my way to Mom's room. She was sitting up in bed, the lights low. When I entered, she turned to look at me, and in the dim light, I saw her eyes clear, focused, completely lucid. Close the door, she said in a normal voice. Not the confused mumble I'd heard for months. A normal, strong voice. I shut the door, my hands shaking. Mom, what? Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk and we don't have much time. I sat completely stunned. Are you okay? What's happening? My mother, who I thought was lost in the fog of dementia, smiled at me. Actually smiled with that re-expression I remembered from childhood when she'd caught me and Glenn sneaking cookies before dinner. I'm fine, Douglas. I've been fine this whole time. But the dementia, the diagnosis, you couldn't even recognize me because I was pretending. The room seemed to tilt. Pretending. She reached over and took my hand. Her grip was firm, steady, nothing like the weak, trembling hands I'd held for months. Douglas, I'm 85 years old. I've been thinking a lot about mortality, about what happens when I'm gone. And I realized I needed to know something. I needed to know which of my sons would actually take care of me. Not for my money, not for inheritance, but because they love me. So, you fake dementia to test us? When Glenn suggested becoming my power of attorney, I saw an opportunity. I agreed, but I also consulted my own lawyer, someone Glenn doesn't know about. I put most of my assets in an irrevocable trust weeks before Glenn got the POA. The accounts he has access to. I only left enough in them to see what he'd do. I couldn't process this. Mom, that's why didn't you tell me? Her eyes grew sad. Because I had to test both of you. I had to see who would visit me when I couldn't give them anything back. Who would hold my hand even when I didn't know their name. And Douglas, you came 3 times a week. You sat with me. You talked to me. Even when I acted like I had no idea who you were. Tears were running down my face. Now, of course, I came. You're my mother. I know that now. But Glenn, she shook her head. Glenn felt Douglas. Worse than I ever imagined. I've been documenting everything. Every time he came to pressure me to sign papers. Every time he got angry when I played confused. Every time he took something from this room thinking I wouldn't notice. I have it all recorded. The $280,000. He took it from the accounts I left accessible. I've been letting him dig his own grave. Mom, he told me you were dead. He's planning a funeral for Friday. She nodded. I know. He told me today during our drive. He said I was going to have an accident, that I'd pass away peacefully. He wanted me to agree to sign papers first, transferring everything, but I refused, played confused. He's running out of time, and he knows it. This is insane. This is dangerous. We need to call the police right now. No, not yet. Robert Chan, your lawyer. He's been my lawyer, too, for the past month. We have a plan, but I need you to trust me, Douglas. Can you do that? I squeezed her hand always. Over the next 2 days, we set everything up. Robert brought in the police, but quietly. They agreed to let Mom's plan play out to catch Glenn in the act with irrefutable evidence. We installed hidden cameras in Mom's room, tiny things the size of a button. We coordinated with the nursing home staff, those we could trust. And Mom continued her act, playing the confused, declining patient whenever Glenn was around. Glenn came twice more. Once to bring papers for Mom to sign, transfer documents for her house. Mom scribbled something illegible, acted like she didn't understand. Glenn's frustration was visible, barely contained. Just sign clearly, Mom, he said through gritted teeth. I'm trying to help you. The second time, Thursday night, he brought a syringe. I watched the video footage later and it made me physically ill. He told Mom it was her medication, but we had it tested later. It was a massive dose of sedatives. Enough to sedate a horse. Mom pretended to take it, but pumped the pills. Tomorrow, Glenn said, smoothing her hair. Tomorrow, you'll finally be at peace, Mom. No more suffering. Friday morning came. Glenn had booked Thornhill Funeral Home. He'd sent out notices, called relatives. Cousins I hadn't seen in years called me offering condolences. I played along, said, yes, the funeral was at 2 p.m. Yes, it was very sudden. The funeral home was packed. Glenn had gone all out, flowers everywhere, a large photo of Mom from 20 years ago at the front of the room. He'd even written an obituary full of flowery language about beloved mother and after a long illness. I sat in the front row with Emma, who'd flown in that morning. Glenn sat across the aisle with Patricia and their kids. His face was composed, appropriately sorrowful. Patricia kept touching his arm, comforting him. His children looked genuinely sad. They loved their grandmother. At exactly 2 p.m., Glenn stood up to give the eulogy. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. We're here today to celebrate the life of Helen Margaret Harrison, born February 14, 1939. Passed away January 7, 2025. Mom was an incredible woman, a teacher who shaped young minds for 35 years, a mother who always put her children first. And in her final months, she trusted me to care for her. She knew I would protect her interests, manage her affairs, and ensure she was comfortable. He paused, his voice catching with emotion that I now knew was completely false. Mom always loved me best. He continued, she told me so many times. She knew I was the responsible one, the one who would take care of everything. She wanted me to have her house, her cottage, everything she'd worked for because she trusted me to use it wisely to take care of the family. I stood up, every head in the room turned. That's interesting, Glenn, I said loudly. Want to tell everyone where Mom really is right now? Confusion rippled through the room. Glenn's face went white. Douglas, sit down. This isn't the time. Where's the body, Glenn? Where's Mom's body? She's being cremated. We discussed this. Really? Because I called the crematorium. They don't have her. Patricia grabbed Glenn's arm. Glenn, what is he talking about? The doors at the back of the funeral home opened. Every person in the room turned and there framed in the doorway was my mother. She walked in slowly using a walker, but her back was straight and her eyes were sharp. Behind her, 2 police officers in uniform followed. The room erupted. People stood up, gasping. Someone screamed. Glenn's daughter burst into tears. Mom made her way down the aisle. When she reached Glenn, she stopped. Hello, son, she said clearly. I'm not dead, but your inheritance is. Glenn's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mom, you're confused. You're sick. This is a mistake. I'm not confused, Glenn. I've been recording everything for the past 8 months. Every threat, every theft, every time you tried to get me to sign documents, transferring my assets to you, every time you drugged me to keep me compliant. She turned to the assembled crowd. Many of them were crying now. Some in relief, others in shock. I'm sorry for deceiving all of you, Mom said. But I had to know the truth. I had to see what my son would do when he thought I was helpless. And what I found broke my heart. One of the officers stepped forward. Glenn Harrison, you're under arrest for elder abuse, theft over $5,000, fraud, and attempted probate fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Glenn tried to run. He actually tried to push past the officer and run for the door, but he only made it 3 steps before he was tackled, handcuffed. His kids were sobbing. Patricia stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. As they led Glenn away, he shouted back at Mom, I'm your son. You can't do this to me. I needed that money. Mom watched him go, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. You were my son, but you stopped being my child the moment you decided my life was worth less than my bank account. The legal proceedings took months. Glenn initially tried to fight the charges, claiming Mom was actually incompetent and he was just trying to help, but the evidence was overwhelming. Video footage of him trying to force her to sign documents. Audio recordings of his threats. Bank records showing the theft. Dr. Whitmore's testimony after he was granted immunity about how Glenn had pressured him to prescribe unnecessary medications. In the end, Glenn pleaded guilty. He got 5 years in prison, was ordered to repay the $280,000 he'd stolen, plus $50,000 in fines. He lost his real estate license permanently. Patricia divorced him, got full custody of the kids. They were devastated, but Emma and I tried to stay in their lives, tried to be the stable family they needed. Dr. Whitmore lost his medical license. He knowingly prescribed dangerous medications to an elderly patient at the behest of her POA without proper evaluation. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario was not lenient. As for Mom, she moved into a small condo near my house. She was done with the big house, done with maintaining property. She wanted to be close to family, to Emma when she visited. To me, we had dinner together twice a week. She volunteered again, this time at an elder abuse prevention center, sharing her story to help others recognize the warning signs. We established the Helen Harrison Elder Protection Fund with part of the money Glenn had returned. It provides legal assistance to seniors fighting financial abuse cases and funds educational programs about POA responsibilities. One evening about a year after everything happened, Mom and I sat on my back porch watching another Toronto snowfall. She held a mug of tea wrapped in a thick blanket. Do you ever regret it? I asked. The way you tested us. She was quiet for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my own son could do what he did. But Douglas, I don't regret finding out the truth. I had to know who would love me when I had nothing to give. You gave me everything that mattered. I said, you taught me integrity. You taught me that doing the right thing matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. And that's why you passed the test. Not because you visited me, though that mattered. But because even when you thought I was gone, even when you thought you were getting nothing, you fought for what was right. You didn't let Glenn get away with it. You protected me even when I couldn't protect myself. That's what family does. Real family, yes, but blood doesn't make you family, Douglas. Love does. Choice does. Showing up does. Glenn was my blood, but he stopped being family the moment he decided I was just an asset to liquidate. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow pile up on the fence, on the bare trees. Inside, I could hear my phone buzzing. Emma, probably calling from Vancouver for our weekly check-in. Mom's lawyer may be with updates on the charitable fund. Life moving forward. Mom looked at me, her eyes still sharp and clear. You know what the saddest part is? What? If Glenn had just asked, if he'd just been honest about his financial problems, I would have helped him. Not with everything, not enabling poor choices, but I would have helped. Instead, he chose to steal. He chose to treat me like I was already dead. And that choice cost him everything. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand. This remarkable woman who taught me more about strength and dignity in the past year than in all the years before. She survived betrayal by her own son, orchestrated her own rescue, and came out the other side determined to help others. That's the thing about family, the real kind. It's not about blood. It's not about inheritance. It's about showing up. It's about loving someone even when they can't give you anything back. It's about fighting for what's right, even when it means standing against your own brother. Glenn made his choices. He chose greed over love. He chose theft over integrity. And he's paying the price, not just in prison time, but in the loss of his children's respect, his wife, his career, and his mother's love. As for me, I got something far more valuable than any inheritance. I got more years with my mother, real years, where we could talk and laugh and heal. I got the knowledge that when tested, I did the right thing. And I got the chance to be part of something bigger, helping other families avoid what we went through. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. True family protects the vulnerable. And sometimes the bravest thing an 85-year-old woman can do is pretend to be helpless just to find out who will help her when she can't help herself. That's what I learned from Helen Harrison, my mother, my hero, the woman who taught me that dignity matters more than dollars. And that real love shows up even when there's nothing to gain.